my name is Jaël. I am a 23-year-old student, educational sciences from the Netherlands, and welcome to A Life of Learning. Today we will talk about trauma. Gifted kid trauma, to be specifically, because like the walking stereotype that I apparently am, I grew up as a gifted child and then developed pretty bad mental health issues later on in life. However, a few months ago I went through EMDR therapy to work on processing my trauma, and surprisingly it actually helped like a lot. So today I wanted to share my experiences with gifted kid trauma and my experiences with EMDR as a therapy option for gifted kid trauma, and how it helped me in my healing journey, as people call it nowadays. And I want to start with a very big disclaimer here, because gifted kid trauma is not the same as PTSD, which stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, which is also often referred to as trauma. So PTSD is an actual recognized mental health condition that can appear in people when they experience traumatic events in their lives. Whereas gifted kid trauma is more of a term to describe many shared negative experiences that people who grew up gifted had. And then, of course, these negative experiences can, and I guess often do, lead to actual other recognized mental health conditions later on in life. So I guess, in the words of Emma from therapy, in a nutshell, post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health condition that can be developed after big T trauma, whereas gifted kid trauma is often a little t trauma that can lead to other mental health difficulties later in life. But as I said, people do actually develop mental health issues after experiencing gifted kid trauma. So even though it is a little t trauma, I do really believe that it is something that is very important to discuss and talk about. And before people are coming at me in the comments with like, oh no, you grew up smart, how horrible. Yes, of course, I am aware that being conventionally intelligent is also a really big privilege in a lot of ways. But that does not mean that the way society treats gifted individuals is not extremely harmful for those gifted individuals. And that in that sense, growing up gifted is also a really big disadvantage because of the mental health issues that can cause. And not allowing people who grew up as gifted children to discuss these issues just because it might seem like bragging is actually really, really harmful, because that means that this problem does not get addressed, the problem does not get solved, and it just leads to a lot of adults with severe mental health problems that could have been prevented had there been more knowledge about how to adequately deal with gifted children. So yeah, if you're planning on commenting something like that, please don't, because it will just make you an asshole. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive into this topic. So let's start by defining the term gifted kid trauma and discussing why gifted kid trauma arises. So as I said already, gifted kid trauma refers to the negative experiences that many people that grow up as gifted children face. And the reason why these negative experiences often arise is because the environment that gifted children grow up in is often not in line with the needs of a gifted child. And this can take many different forms, because of course there are many different gifted children. But at the core, I think that the main problem is just that it's hard for most people to understand the experience of a gifted child. And because gifted children, in that sense, are often misunderstood by their classmates, their teachers, their parents, they are just often not given support because people think, oh, they're smart, they can figure it out by themselves. Or they are given the wrong support, so support that does not actually fit what they need. So for example, this often happens with children that get really bored and start to underperform, and then instead of giving them more difficult work, they are given easier work. And the experience of consistently not having your needs met is, of course, a form of trauma, but also the awareness that your environment is consistently misunderstanding you as a person can be a form of trauma. And I guess what for a lot of people who grew up as gifted children is the main problem that they developed is that they felt very out of control in childhood and developed ways to cope with this feeling of having a lack of control over their lives and how people perceive them, which can then obviously lead to developing character traits like perfectionism, but also to developing often control-related mental health issues such as anxiety, OCD, depression. Yeah, it's just really not fun and it really fucks up your mental health. So then let's get into how I developed my gifted kid trauma. And I actually already kind of discussed this in one of my previous videos where I discussed my not always very healthy relationship with school and education. But for me personally, even though I was labeled a gifted kid, I was never actually tested for it. So a big part of diagnosing giftedness, at least in the Netherlands, is taking an IQ test. However, my parents were very strongly against this because they felt like it might cause me to sort of define myself in this number that I scored on a test. And I guess that is in a way a very fair point. I mean, it is widely known that IQ tests are quite controversial to begin with, but a big problem in the Netherlands and how our education system is funded is that if you do not have a diagnosis, there is no money to give you support. So this led to a huge discussion between my parents and my teachers. Would they be able to actually afford giving me the support I needed without me having to take this IQ test? And in the end, I absolutely have no clue how they did it, but they found a way to make it work. But the condition to me getting the extra work that I needed was that I had to keep up my other grades, because if I could not prove that I was gifted through an IQ test, I had to prove that I was gifted by proving that I was smart enough to perform really well in all my school subjects. But what this in practice caused was that I was constantly at risk of losing the privilege to do the extra challenging work that I needed to stay mentally sane in school. So I just developed a really unhealthy obsession with constantly feeling like I had to prove myself academically in order to have my needs met. And yeah, of course, I also faced other issues commonly faced by gifted children. Like, I was not always really good at making friends, because with some people my age, it was just really difficult for me to connect at the same level. But yeah, this idea that I constantly had to prove myself is really what's kind of fucked me up, because it just led to extreme perfectionism, a really unhealthy obsession with always wanting to meet people's expectations, and then later on that just developed in proper generalized anxiety disorder. So then the reason that I decided to start EMDR was because at some point this anxiety was just really negatively impacting my life, my emotional well-being, my academics, but it also started spreading to other things than just school. So where I first would only worry about like not getting good grades, suddenly I was scared to go on trains, I was scared to take buses, and that really made my life quite unlivable. And then I had already gone to a psychologist, once at age 15 and once at age 21, but both times the therapy helped, but it did not persist. And then like more than a year ago, I really ended up in this sort of like weird combination of a simultaneous burnout and bore out, because I just ended up in a university program that was really not well suited for me. And then I went on TikTok, which is obviously the best place on earth to get mental health advice. But that is where I sort of got introduced to this whole hashtag just gifted kid burnout things. And I just recognized an uncomfortable amount of myself in that. So that was when I started thinking like, okay, maybe I should not really be looking into I have anxiety, how to treat it, but more into I grew up as a gifted kid and apparently that fucked me up a bit. How can I properly deal with that? And then I found a therapist that specialized in treating gifted people, and she uses EMDR as her main therapy approach to help these gifted individuals. And I had never really heard of the use of EMDR in this context because I did some introductory psychology courses in university, but EMDR there was really more focused on treating individuals with PTSD resulting from like big traumatic events. But the way she described her reasons for why she uses EMDR to treat gifted people actually made a lot of sense to me, and I was like, I just really want to try this because I really don't want to be super anxious anymore all the time, and it just sounded very promising. So EMDR stands for, and I'm gonna read this because this is too much to remember, but it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it was originally developed to help people who suffered from PTSD to process their memories of the traumatic event or events they experienced. But even though it was originally developed to process so-called big T trauma, it has actually also been found to be very effective for people suffering from negative consequences of little t trauma. And how my therapist explained it when we started this whole procedure is that when you are thinking about something, then your whole head gets filled up with that memory that you are thinking about. So what you do during an EMDR therapy session is that you consequently let this traumatic memory fill up your whole brain capacity. And then what the therapist does is, while you are thinking about this memory, make you look from left to right really quickly, that's sort of the eye movement part, and do other tasks to just take up working memory space. So whereas first, all of your working memory was filled up by this traumatic memory. Now it's not only filled up with this traumatic memory, but also with sort of the coordination skills that you need to have to do the eye movements and to do all these other side tasks. And what this does is it basically forces the memory to become smaller in your brain. So it forces the memory to take up less space in your mental structure, I guess. And by forcing the memory to become smaller, it apparently, I don't know exactly how this works, but it loses its emotional load. And by reducing the size of this memory and the emotional load associated to this memory, you also help to sort of minimize the unhealthy behavioral and thought patterns that you have developed as a result of this memory. And this is why using EMDR to treat little t trauma can help reduce mental health issues like anxiety. So then the question, did it work? As I already hinted at the start of this video, it really did. And yes, I am looking surprised because I really was surprised how much this did for me. Because I really noticed that even though I sometimes still get these unhealthy, kind of intrusive thoughts of, oh no, if I fail this test, then no employer will ever want to hire me, and I will never get a job. I just don't feel the emotional load associated with those thoughts anymore, so they don't immediately give me like an emotional anxious reaction to those thoughts. And this just makes it a lot easier to just have the thought come and then let the thought go, you know, in a very mindful meditation sense of, oh, I had this thought, well, is this productive? No, okay, bye. It sounds really weird to say it in that way, but that really is how I experience it. It's just like the thought comes in, I realize that it is not a productive thought, and then I just let it go and I continue doing what I was doing. And this just makes that having a thought like that does not pull me into this like huge negative downward spiral of anxiety, but yeah, just let the thought be and keep doing my thing. And yeah, so I also discussed this with my therapist, because I was like, you know, I noticed this while we were still in the process of the therapy, and I was just like, yeah, is this what this is supposed to do? Is this indeed what the result should be? And she said that yes, that is the normal thing to happen, because you take away the negative emotions associated with certain memories, and that also takes away the negative emotions associated with the thought patterns that have resulted from those memories. And yeah, I really don't know how that exactly works in your brain. I guess that scientists don't really know yet either, but it is really weird to experience it. But I am really happy with the results, because it really has been the first time that I went through therapy where I have really sort of experienced a real obvious change in how I was thinking and feeling. And yeah, I just feel like it has enabled me to process my thoughts and emotions in a way more healthy way, because they are not so overwhelming. So yes, I would definitely recommend EMDR if you are someone who grew up gifted, or even if there are other multi traumas that have impacted your life and that you are now experiencing negative consequences of. In the end, I am really happy that I did it, and I would definitely recommend it to others. So yeah, that was everything I think I wanted to say about this topic. I really hope that if you made it this far, that you thought that this video was helpful, and if you did, then make sure to give it a like so that others can find this video as well. And if you are someone that has experience with gifted kid trauma or EMDR therapy and you want to share that, then please do so in the comments, because I think hearing more experiences with this can be very valuable. You know, we can create this sort of resource below the video where people can find more information and more experiences about these topics. And of course, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more videos from me. I usually make videos about productivity, study tips, but also about mental health. So if those are things that you are interested in, then definitely subscribe so you can stick around. And then all the other stuff to do for me is to wish you lots of love and a life of learning.